Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me is Ben Jones, Product Development Specialist with Nasdaq Index Research, to discuss small caps, their recent performance, valuation, and industry exposure, as well as the ETFs tracking the diversity of offerings from Nasdaq Indexes. Ben, it's great to see you as always. Welcome back to Trade Talks.
Hey, thanks for having me on again, Jill.
All right, Ben, let's start with the rise of small caps. It certainly has been the story.
It has, and it's one that goes back a long time ago, right? Where maybe not too long, but 2 decades ago, small caps were one of the best performing assets in U.S. equity markets, right? But that was a period that we often call the lost decade for equities, right? That was a period when the S&P 500 was actually down about 10% on a total return basis, and that was between 2000 and 2009. But small cap was actually up over 40% on a total return basis. The problem is, over the past 10 years, it has been a lost decade for small caps, where it actually has struggled relative to large caps. In fact, you see that the S&P 500 has outperformed the Russell 2000 by about 49% over the past 10 years. But there is good news, right? And hence the title, The Rise of Small Caps. When you look at a more recent time frame and narrow down the window, we've actually seen small caps start to outperform large cap. We started to see that late surge really happen in the latter part of last year, especially after the presidential election with the announcement of the COVID-19 vaccination. Remember, we talked about a while ago that markets are discounting mechanisms. So, maybe the market is foreseeing really good conditions in the future for small caps, whether improvements in the economy or, whatever the market is viewing. But overall, we have seen small caps begin to outperform large cap. And that's an important story going forward because it's been a long time coming for this segment of the marketplace.
What are the differences in industry exposure between small and large caps?
Right, and this is an important part of the story. When you look at small caps versus large cap, and this is using traditional cap-weighted indexes, we see that the large cap indexes, at least using the Nasdaq US Large Cap Index, is dominated by technology and consumer services, right? But when you start to look, at the lower end of the market towards the small cap segment, we see that's a different story, right? You can see that there's a healthy amount of financial exposure. You see other industries represented like industrials and healthcare, consumer services, consumer goods. So what you see is that there's kind of more parity from a sector or industry exposure standpoint than what you typically get for, let's say, a more traditional large cap index. And if you go to valuations and look at the valuation slide, you can see how this changes the narrative a bit. We actually look at small caps, they're still a good value today. So this is looking at price to book ratio, comparing the US large cap index versus the Nasdaq US small cap index. We actually see that from a price to book standpoint, small caps are at a decent valuation, relatively speaking. Not as good as where they were, let's say, at the midpoint of last year, but still at a better point than, let's say, what we see large caps. And I think this has something to do with the industry exposure, where it's not overweighted or tilted towards more of those growth-like industries like consumer services and like technology.
And then finally, let's review the different types of small cap ETFs that are available.
But as you know, there's a number of different small cap ETFs that are out there that advisors and investors can access. And at Nasdaq, we take pride that we are home to some of the world's most innovative indexes, but also we work with some innovative ETF issuers. So in this screenshot, what I provided you is a list of some different ETFs that track Nasdaq indexes across a wide array of different ETF issuers, right? You see Invesco and First Trust and Index IQ and Victory Shares and Principal, just to name a few. But the point is that they all give you the ability to harness and track different elements and characteristics and trends within the small cap space. Whether you're looking for a multi-factor solution or an income solution or maybe a momentum solution, the key is that you have a choice, and there's a lot of different offerings, different sizes and flavors to choose from. But overall, the key is that we are seeing improvement from small caps, and more importantly, there's ways that you can garner this exposure through index-based ETFs.
All right, Ben. Great insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks, and thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.